Welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Buzz podcast. We're happy that you're joining us again as we continue to talk about all sorts of things in the Catholic world. My name is Father Daniele, and I'm joined, as always, by Josh Sullivan.
Yeah, hello.
Welcome to you.
Thank you very much.
And Matt Van Milligan. Welcome, Matt.
Hello.
Yeah, so we talked already about children and is having kids worth it. And I wanted to thank you guys because you guys shared your perspective of being fathers and raising children.
Have you noticed that actually, I just want to say that when we recorded that and then this last week or two, it's actually come up a couple of times in newspapers about like China starting to worry about the birth rate and people are starting to worry about birth rate.
Yeah.
We're ahead of like social media.
That's right.
Like, you know, I think they listen to the buzz. They start thinking, okay, that's what we're worried about.
Yes.
Let's write about it in the newspapers.
I think there was a balloon over our studio.
They must have been listening in. Yeah. That's great.
So then we had this incident that happened. I don't know if you guys heard about, I'm sure you have, this student. His name is Josh.
Yeah, good name.
Sounds like a good guy.
Yeah. Obviously knows his faith.
He's a student at a Catholic high school in Renfrew, Ontario. So the National Post reporting and all these different sources are reporting that the student was suspended from school, from a Catholic school, for defending Catholic teaching. Specifically around the area of gender, right? I guess there was a debate going on. We don't know all the details, you know, and really the school board has been really quiet on releasing a statement. Same with the school, the actual school. So we're hearing his side of the story. But seems to be that he was suspended for these comments, saying that there is only a male and female. God created males and females, right? So he was suspended, and then I guess while he was suspended, you know,
he came
back to school, I guess on the Monday, and because he was suspended, he's considered trespassing. So they had him arrested. So of course, people are like, someone got arrested for defending the Catholic faith. I mean, that's he got arrested for trespassing.
That's right.
So let's just be clear.
Yeah.
But he did get suspended.
Yeah,
as far as we know,
for defending the
Catholic faith.
teaching at a Catholic school. And I think that kind of brings up, if all the details that we have are true,
right?
This is a disturbing event to bring to kind of light. There are things that are being said here that if they prove to be true, Catholic teaching is not being upheld or taught at a Catholic school system. So what does that mean? Yeah,
and that's exactly why I sort of bring it forward today, because I think this is not an isolated incident.
No.
I mean, you know, you both have been around the publicly funded Catholic school systems. For those listening outside of Canada, like in our province, Catholic schools are publicly funded by the government, right? And oftentimes the Catholic school system sort of, you know, makes sure people know that, like, hey, we're publicly funded, so we have to rely on sort of what the government tells us to do. Yeah. And we know that oftentimes the Catholic faith is not really upheld in Catholic schools. That's really not the conversation we're having today, but it is noteworthy that gone are the days when people used to send their kids to Catholic schools and think that they were producing little Catholics.
Yeah.
I think it's a world. Oh, sorry, Matt.
No, I was just saying, it certainly comes to bear, because if our discussion today is a continuation on that, I mean, like, is it worth having kids? It's like, okay, what's step 2 of that? What does it look like raising kids, you know, that you want to be faithful in a world that seems kind of increasingly hostile is maybe too harsh a word, but increasingly non-accepting of you know, the actual Catholic worldview, even in if this turns out to be the case. You know, this represents a turning point for a lot of people's perception of the publicly funded Catholic school system. That it's like, okay, now we're not allowed in there. And
honestly, I think, and it's not just, you know, people will say, "Oh, there goes Father Daniele criticizing the Catholic school system again." You know, and it's not just where I currently live in the current school board. It's everywhere. Like talking with families and talking with people, my friends who are priests, my Catholic friends from all over the province. It's a continuing, ongoing repeatable story that their children are confronted with things that are opposite of the Catholic faith in Catholic schools, and their children are often looked at like the weirdos or the religious freaks,
the religious nuts,
the religious nuts. You know what I mean? And so here we go. But what would you expect from a school board that is funded by the government? That's a whole other conversation to have, where the Catholic Church let go of these schools back in the day in Ontario, anyways. And they do rely on funding.
I think it's important to note there are individuals in the schools that are good Catholics, that are good Catholic teachers. Even they're sometimes far and few between, and they're fighting. Like, we got to pray for them because they are far and few between, but they are like doing their darndest, and it's so like they're fighting an uphill battle almost on one side, and only like they're not supported, so let's pray for those guys. Everybody that's listening to the podcast, let's like offer that up. But the second part of that, I think we're coming away from a culture where the nuns and the priests used to run the schools, and so you didn't have to worry about what was being taught there because it was being taught by a priest or maybe a sister who gave up her life for the church. So I think what we have is I call it a vicious triangle. Okay, and so it's the triangle has the 3 points of learning that a kid would have. Like, my kids have 3 points of learning. They have their faith through the church. They can get their faith ideally through 3 different points, which is the church. So by going to church, they get taught through church, whether it be through the homilies or through activities, community
and just
events.
Prayer, being in worship. Yeah,
exactly. And they pick up on stuff, right? And they can ask questions through their parents, which is my job as a parent, first educator, that kind of thing. And then if I send them to a Catholic school, through the Catholic school system is another place where they get faith. The problem I think that we have is that those 3 triangles all have an excuse. And so what happens is that we have, for instance, let's use the Catholic school as an example. The Catholic school system goes, wait. We're a Catholic school for sure, but I have to teach them math, English, phys ed, this, that, and the other. Religion is one of those things I have to teach, but it's one of those subjects that they can get other places. They're not going to get math anywhere else. So I need to make sure that I focus on these areas, and then religion becomes a thing. You know what I mean? But then you have parents that go, well, listen, I send my kid to Catholic school. So it's not my job to teach them faith. I send them to Catholic school, and the church knows where they are. Like, they're stuck at school every day, all day. Like, I work 24/7. Like, I work 40 hours a week, sorry, whatever the case. I work all summer. Like, if the church and the school, Catholic school, want to teach them about faith, that's great, because I don't have the time. And then you have the church say, listen, we're not allowed in the schools, or like, they don't bring the students to us, so we don't have a way to talk to these students, and the parents don't bring them on Sunday, and the teachers don't bring them, and so like everybody seems to have an excuse. It's a vicious triangle where it's the other 2 people's responsibilities to raise faith. Whether like the parents blame the school and the church, the school blames the church and the parents, and like everybody. Whereas if we were to take out the Catholic school system altogether, now you're left with the church and the parents, and those are the only 2 ways that a kid's going to grow faith. I think we're at the point where parents have to start realizing that that's the case, and the church needs to realize that that's the case, that they potentially aren't receiving the type of education that you would have expected, or maybe you received from the nuns or the priests and everything else growing up earlier on in other times.
I think the generation that's now having kids, mind you, never necessarily received a full grade education either, because that's the time that I went through school, and I didn't receive that. So I think that that's the time that we're kind of at, and that's the time we have to start to understand. So parents have to realize when we're raising our kids, by putting them in a Catholic school doesn't mean anything. It's just like putting them in a public school, unfortunately, at this point.
And I say that as someone who went to public school all my life. People are surprised by that when I say that I went to public school
and became a priest.
Right? Yeah, and became a priest. And I went to junior kindergarten, senior kindergarten at Catholic school. And then we switched to the public system for the rest of our studies. But my first real experience with a Catholic school was when I was a seminarian, and my assignment was in a school. And, it was bizarre for me to see a school with crucifixes everywhere. And I thought, wow, I was really excited, But in reality, it was just like my public school. Like there wasn't, it was like a public school with a crucifix on the wall or whatever it might be.
It's publicly funded. I mean, that's part of, I think that's part of the place where we get our hands tied, because at one time the Catholic Church was funding it, right?
Yeah.
They were the ones teaching and everything. But
you raise a good point. So now what do we do? So we want parents to understand that we have to stop thinking that I send my kids to Catholic school, they're learning about the Catholic faith. Let's just be honest, it's not happening. So how do we raise children in the Catholic faith without relying on the Catholic school?
Yeah.
Right. So
I think you kind of nailed it, that, parents need to recognize their role as first educators, because if we're going to stop this cycle of pass the buckmanship, you have to recognize that the buck stops here, because it's easy and maybe convenient to try and kind of outsource that responsibility, but again, recognizing that you are primarily responsible as a parent for your child's faith formation. I think having some accountability there, really can drive your decision making, and people can go about this in different ways. So, my experience, I went to public school as well. It's like, but our way of approaching that now is that we're homeschooling our kids. But we may not homeschool our kids indefinitely. They may end up going to high school. We still have some decisions to make there. But all of those decisions are really trying to take into account the fact that, at the end of the day, we're responsible. And even homeschooling them, they're not getting a lot of their faith formation in, math and, the science that we're teaching, or like you'd say kind of the core subjects. Then it's like, no, a lot of the formation in the faith needs to happen kind of outside of school, or like be a part of the rest of our life,
regular life.
Yeah.
I think it's important too, when you're talking about homeschooling, one of the things that your kids start to see you then as are educators, though. And so they start to look at mom and dad as the source of reason, a source of teaching, of knowledge, of a place that they look at for answers, right? And sometimes we have to look at how our relationship is with our kids, and if our relationship is not like my kids, we have a saying, my kids listen to a lot of podcasts, believe it or not. And the funny part is they listen to a lot of my podcasts, not necessarily the Catholic Buzz. They do listen to the Catholic Buzz, but not always the Catholic Buzz. It's a lot of the podcasts that I listen to, though, they listen to on a regular basis. And then we have a conversation, but I think they do it specifically. We have conversations about it. It's awesome. But sometimes they bring up issues and problems and things. And I'm like, wow, that's deep. Like, how is that going on? But they're bringing them to me for an answer. I think it's important as parents to realize you don't have all the answers. I think if any parent thinks that they are the perfect parent and know everything, I don't know what delusion you're living in. I think every single person entering into parenthood is scared for a little bit for the reasons that they don't have all the answers. And the parents that are more comfortable with being parents are realizing that they don't have all the answers, but that they're willing to either find them or discover what, to go looking to find the right answers, especially when it comes to faith. So for me, when my kids bring up a problem that I don't have an answer to, I have to say, hey, that's a real good question. I don't know. Well, you know what? Let's talk to Father Daniele next time, or let's talk to Matt next time. Let's get an answer there. But I have no idea what that. That's a really good thought pondering question. I think it's important that parents can say that to their kids and realize that they don't have to be the be all end all of knowledge for their kids. Teachers, and especially teachers in the Catholic School Board, but teachers, I think, play from that same responsibility and role. And one of the things that we have a hard time with is that as parents and as teachers, as educators, we have a hard time saying, I don't know the answer, because you're supposed to. And then and kids are looking to you for that. So what happens is what either comes out of your mouth is what you interpret to be what the church teaches, or like if you don't know, it's something made up because you don't know. Or you're able to say, either something made up, or you're able to say to the kid, I don't know, but I'll find the answer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It goes right back to what you guys are saying. It goes right back to the Catechism of the Catholic Church. That parents are the primary teachers, educators of their children. And the Catechism actually says some beautiful things, right? Starting from paragraph 2222 all the way down to 2231, right? So, but this is really one that I really like. Number one, it says, through the grace of the sacrament of marriage, parents receive the responsibility and privilege of evangelizing their children. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
And then later on, excuse me, later on, it says that education in the faith by parents should begin in a child's earliest years. Okay, so this happens when family members help one another to grow in faith by the witness of the Christian life in keeping with the gospel, right? And it talks about how parents have the mission of teaching their children to pray, discover their vocation, and to be part of the parish community. Right, like you said, all these things they pick up. They pick up the example of going to being part of a parish community, and I really think that I think that if parents want to raise their children in the Catholic faith, there are opportunities at your parish where it can supplement, if not really take over fully, the teaching of the faith. Like there's youth programs, there's children's liturgies. There's teen programs. There's all these sort of age group programs where kids can have those conversations about faith and deepen their faith. And not only that, but to find friends who practice the same faith or who at least are trying to strive for holiness, right? So to encourage that, I think is really amazing. But, what happens to parents who aren't going to church? They want their kids to learn about Jesus. They're not going to church. They don't know where to start. That's what they do. They send them to Catholic school, right? So what can parents do at home? We have to be an example. I think part of being an example is we have to say to ourselves, okay, if we're going to be an example for our children of faith, then we have to take that on as a family to start new habits, like to start saying, okay, we're going to go check out that church on Sunday or whatever it might be. We're going to try and get involved. We're going to try and do this as a family. Maybe start going to the socials or start going to whatever, and then sneak into mass or whatever it might be if you feel uncomfortable going. But there's something at your local parish that can help raise your children in the Catholic faith. But it has to start somewhere. It has to start.
Yeah, I think we said in our episode on tithing, it's like that if you want to raise generous kids, be generous. If you want to raise faithful kids, be faithful, be that example. I think you were saying, and the Catechism articles as well, saying that there's kind of like a natural progression from from like that really, really early childhood development to you want your children to become contributing functional members of a parish, of a faith community. That, as parents, we need to recognize that we don't have all the answers. Yes. It's like, but, and you're a little bit further along in that journey than I am. I haven't really hit that expiry date where, they're asking the questions. But I think, and something that homeschooling enables us to do, is that it allows us to not just give them the answers, but give them the tools to find the answers themselves. Again, if you're involved in homeschooling communities, there's a lot of different reasons and like a range of reasons that people homeschool. Some of which is to, cut their kids off from the world because, there's scary things out there. The school system isn't what they think it should be, and it's and in some cases just kind of driven by a lot of fear. But having that environment that you can protect your kids from that, that's a short-term solution. Like you can create that environment where you're actually preparing them to encounter the world. You're preparing them to enter a parish and actually develop their own identity, develop their own faith, and hopefully that's a combination of the information that you give them, but more so kind of the witness or living out your vocation. To form them as faithful.
I like what you say there because that's it exactly. It's be in the world, not of the world, if that makes sense. But they have to learn to be in the world. Yeah. Because otherwise they are. So you talked about being viewed as the religious nuts. Well, you can be viewed that way just by going to mass on Sunday, right?
Sure.
But it is like they are going to encounter opposition and problems in their faith, and it might be as simple as going to school and them saying, let's pray the Our Mother who art in heaven prayer versus Our Father who art in heaven. And that was an experience I had at high school, and I had to stand up against my teacher and talk to them about it. Wait a second. And no, but God doesn't have a gender. And that was a discussion that we had in front of a religion class, me in grade 9 to my teacher who was bringing these ideas forward and stuff, and having to have a discussion, an argument. But then I had to go home and ask my parents, okay, how do I defend this? How do I, and they, but it was they're going to, if they've never received that, if everything's hunky-dory, it's kind of like
when you hear about the trees, they're trying to grow trees in the I forget where it was. It's like in a greenhouse kind of thing. And as soon as they brought the trees, like as soon as they took the greenhouse away and they left the trees there, they all blew over. And they were trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Why aren't these trees standing up properly? Why aren't these trees growing properly? And it was because the trees, like they let them grow for 5 or 6 years in these greenhouse environments, and then they remove all the cover and everything away. And what they were realizing was they weren't used to stress or wind. So the wind was actually causing these roots to grow down strong and firm and understand and be able to defend and uphold and keep the tree growing straight when the wind was blowing hard. And what they were doing was they were growing without any of these stressors on them. And then when they were given the real thing, they just blew right over, you know? And so it's important as parents to raise your kids in the world, but not of the world. And you do that through example. For me, one of the biggest examples of my life, and it's probably where I get a lot of what I came from, not only my parents, but specifically I remember my grandfather. My grandfather used to go to the church and work at the men's club and the Knights of Columbus and that type of thing. And I attribute one of the things when I think back to why I wanted to be a Knights of Columbus or be part of the men that help out with the parish and the church and everything else was because of the experiences that I had with my grandfather in the Knights of Columbus. He would bring me along in grade 7, grade 8, whatever, to do all this stuff. And the guys there were great. Like they knew me as Josh, the grade 7, 8-year-old kid that came along with his grandfather, but they knew me as my own identity. And that was one of the first times living out my faith became my own, because my grandfather brought me along, but it wasn't a forceful thing. It wasn't, and so to this day, I'm one of the guys that help out with the Knights of Columbus, and my kids, I bring my kids along for that exact reason, you know, to help out every time I do something with the church, if I can bring them. I think it's living out through example.
Can you guys share a little bit about what it looks like in your family to raise your kids Catholic? Like, what are some of the things you did? Because I know your kids, they're quite faithful, you know. Like, what are some of the things you do? Because parents at home might be saying, well, what the heck am I supposed to do? You know, like, how do I start? So, and I know there's lots to it. You've been raising kids for many years, but can you give us a few things that are helpful for your families?
The first thing that comes to mind is, I'll say two things. Okay, the first thing that comes to mind is actually developing a habit of prayer with them. So, you know, we have Good Morning Jesus prayers, and, you know, we all sit down, but it's not just, you know, this is the list of prayers that we say and we go through them, you know, so that we can get our day started. You know, they each have an opportunity to go through their own intentions, to pick something to pray for. And, you know, sometimes it's their stuffy, sometimes it's the dog, sometimes like, but it gets them in the habit of, you know, thinking for themselves, you know, what do you want to offer up your day for? What do you want to pray for today? And we do that, you know, throughout the day. The other thing is that we have... I'm going to add two more things here.
Exponentially.
No, they're related. But the second thing is that we just have kind of an open policy on questions. They can ask us anything about anything, anytime. And our oldest is the only one who's kind of leveraged that policy so far. But it really, like... when they're not afraid or they're not, you know, scared of what their parents are going to think if they ask this question, it really opens your perspective as a parent to like what your child's actually thinking about, what they're concerned about, what they're, and like if they're not hiding anything away because, you know, they're worried about what you're going to think about them. The other thing that we do, and that's kind of like that, is that we don't actually shelter them from a ton of media. Or like, well, and we're not watching many risque things in the first place, but like, well, you know, we'll watch Star Wars with them, or we'll watch and of course we make sure it's reasonably age appropriate, but we won't necessarily kind of just shut off the outside world from them. You know, we'll play video games, but they have the opportunity to stop at any point and we can explain anything that's going on. Yeah. If they're frightened, you're like, you can explain, you know, it's just actors in ketchup packets. Like it's so, yeah. So again, it's we're hopefully we're giving them the tools to encounter things that they wouldn't otherwise be exposed to, but we're doing it alongside them. We're kind of modeling that for them.
You're shepherding. Can I say right there? Yeah, 100%. Everything you just said, that we do the same. Opening up with prayer to exposing them to the real world with you there, so that you're their guide, you're their mentor, you're the person that says, okay, so then, and then sometimes I explain, depending, again, age appropriateness. I have teenagers now, and so sometimes there's difficult decisions to be made. And they can hear me and my wife talking about it. And so we're very open. We don't hide things from our kids hardly at all. I mean, again, depending on respect of privacy and things like that. But for a lot of times, like if we're struggling with something, me and my wife, let's say, are struggling maybe with finances or struggling with it, we're very open about it, and not in a bad way. Like this is what it's at. This is where we're at. We're going to offer this up in prayer right now. Mm-hmm. So if you guys can, or their family members going through rough times, whether it be separation, divorce, those types of things, then we are very open. Those are real world things that happen. Mm-hmm. So we talk about, what does this mean? What does this look like? What does the church teach about this? And we're able to actually, so my 10-year-old was asking me some questions. We had some very deep discussions just recently with some things that were going on with family. And I'm going to the dump. I have to go to the dump and normally what happens is the boys pack the trailer and all the dump stuff, and then I go to the dump. And if they want to come with me, it seems to be the car rides for me that the boys seem to want to sit along and ask questions for. And it's always, so my 9-10-year-old, he goes, can I come with you to the dump? I'm like, yeah, for sure. Okay, we're going to the dump. And sometimes I really want to just be by myself and listen to audiobooks as I go to the dump. I got to be honest, I enjoy that driving by myself time. But at the same time, I really do love talking with them. So it's like, no, and sure enough, that whole ride, all the way, the 15 minutes to the dump and the 15 minutes back from the dump, like it's a half hour plus when we're unloading and stuff, was just me and him talking. And it was talking about some of the things that he heard in the conversation that we were having in the house. And he really wanted to know, like, what does this mean? Or what does this happen? And we have that same thing, open. There's no stupid question. You can ask us anything. And if I don't know an answer, I'm going to tell you I don't know an answer. Or, so sometimes they ask, like when they're at a certain age, they ask questions about sex or things. Mm-hmm. And we try to be as direct with them as possible without alluding, like there is a certain level of detail. You have to realize that when a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old asks you about where babies come from, there's a very simple, easy explanation because all they're looking for is some sort of answer. Mm-hmm. So you say, well, when mommy and daddy, they love each other and they give each other a kiss, and then the baby comes. Like, and God knows that they're ready for a baby, and then the baby comes. And that, to them, boom, that's all you have to tell a kid at a certain age. Yeah. Eventually, you have to get into more detail. Unfortunately, my kids are growing up just thinking that they kiss each other on the wedding night, and then all of a sudden, boom, now you may kiss the bride, and then they're pregnant. That's how it happens. But no, but you can get in as they get older, and you can get into deeper detail with that. But being open and giving them a very direct answer, so that, but not a false answer either. Like when we talk about the birds and the bees, it's all allegorical, if you will, or we don't do that. We answer very straightforward, as much as straightforward as I can. But like I said, there's a kiss, and they don't need to know details from that. But that's and then when they get older and they start thinking about it a little bit more, then we go into deeper details. Yeah. The other thing that I'll say is discipline really comes into play. I think you have to be able to discipline your kids, and not for a reason that you're mad and you want to be able to control them. It has nothing to do with that, but it has to do with their own well-being. Mm-hmm. They have to be able to tell them, like, they can't, growing up, they don't come with self-control. Mm-hmm. They don't. It's something that is instilled in them from their parents. And so you do that through discipline, which means, okay, no, you did that, you have to go sit on the stairs. Yeah. Just sitting on the stairs and being out of the conversation, using discipline to do that, you're teaching them self-control, because they could get off the stairs, but then you go put them back on the stairs. You're showing them, no, you have to keep yourself here. Again, it's not to punish them so much. I mean, it is a punishment, and you're teaching them right from wrong. But a big part of that is about self-control itself. Mm-hmm. So my kids learn, and they can, like, so now we're at the point where we don't have physical, like, you don't spank a 16-year-old, right? Like, that just doesn't happen. But we have a conversation. Definitely, when there's problems now, it's like, okay, what did you do wrong? Let's walk through this. And so then I punched my brother. Yes, you did. Why was that wrong? Well, no excuses. Why was it what you did was wrong? Like, he might have done something wrong. I don't care about him. What did you do, and why was that wrong? Yeah. So we have those conversations so that they can understand their actions, understand how they affected someone. And then I will normally say, yeah, you're right. What he did was wrong. What he did was not okay. How you reacted maybe wasn't okay. right? And so you explaining, especially when there's siblings involved, I take them alone a lot of times. I not always handle it together. I like, okay, you come see me. And then I bring the other one in. You come see me. Sometimes I have to bring them both in just so I can actually get the truth out of what happened in the situation, who hit who first and whatnot. But yeah, so talking it through, being open, but being disciplined, and specifically talking them through and understanding, like they understand why they did what was wrong. Is that okay? Now, what are you going to do next time? Yeah. I'm going to do okay. And then if there's a punishment that needs to be had at that point, at a certain point, my 16-year-old doesn't need punishments. You know what I mean? It just doesn't happen anymore. There are some times where I say, okay, the next person to do this gets this punishment. And then he'll do it, and then he gets the punishment. Yeah. But for the most part, like if he reacts to something, I don't have to worry about him. He reacts in a way that I am, even my 14-year-old, like I've trained them, I've taught them, I've guided them through the decisions that they make, and I'm very proud of the men that they're becoming, because I think hopefully I've done it right from the beginning, and I watch the decisions that they're making now in their teenage years, and I think, okay, yeah, I can trust them. My 16-year-old is starting to drive soon, and that's that's scary, but I'm thinking, no, I can trust him with this, you know? So
a couple of things that I enjoyed what you said there was that you're being straightforward with them. Yeah. Right. And I like that because kids are finding out things from all over the place.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, like some parents just hand off the tablet and that's like the whole day. You don't know what they're watching online, and they're learning things from other sources. Right. And maybe in more of a brash way, if that makes sense, than if I like how you say you both journey with your kids. Like you are their parent. You're journeying with them. You're raising little people, and with you by their side, you are helping them to understand things in a way that represents your family values, right? Like, yes, other people do this. You know, that's not what we do, and here's why, or whatever it might be, right? The other thing about discipline, that when you were talking, I also know just from being at both of your houses that your kids are, and I don't see this often anymore, have chores.
Yeah, it's a big one.
And that I don't see very often. Like I know me and my brothers had chores growing up, but when they're contributing to the life of the house and the family, you know, and everyone has their own little thing, their own little task. There's a responsibility that's included there.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And I see that in your children.
Giving them responsibility, I think, is a big one too. And realizing, like, so even kind of one of the things I know talking about with Matt and Teresa Marie, a lot of times we'll talk because we have kids that are just a little bit older, but then it'll be like, okay, what does Jojo, because Josiah and Noah are about the same age, what do we let Jojo do? Because for us, he's number 4 in line, whereas for Matt and Teresa Marie, he's the first, right? And I remember with Zach breaking ground going, is he able to do this? Is this something we can trust him with? And checking with Daryl, actually, and like checking with someone who's already been through it and being like, what do you do with your kid at this age? Okay, that's like we're being responsible parents here, right?
Yeah.
But having that, but giving them responsibilities. All my kids cook, clean, like they're going to make amazing husbands. Like my wife has done really good at but they cook, they clean, they do their own laundry. So they have a chore list. So every day, my wife and I, but I'm going to say my wife, to be honest, does our laundry, and very specifically like my dress clothes and her work clothes and those types of things. But everything else in the house gets washed by the boys. So all the towels, all the linens, all that stuff gets through with them. They do all those chores. They fold the laundry, they put the laundry in. They do all the dishes in the house. They also cook all the meals. Like, so my wife and I will cook some meals, but for the most part, I would say that every single person in my house cooks at least one meal once a week, like for the family, you know what I mean? And that's from the 10-year-old. Sometimes that's grilled cheese and macaroni and tomatoes or Kraft Dinner or something. Yeah. But even to like the 16-year-old, and they actually like watch and they look up recipes and they do that on purpose, and we critique them on their recipes. Now normally it's not critique because they
Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah, it's not Gordon Ramsay style, but sometimes
you stop publishing it in the paper.
Exactly. But part of that too is to realize, because you know what, it's really, I mean, one of the things that they've learned really quickly is they make a crappy meal. How are they treated at that time? You know, like everyone's like, oh, this is awful. Well, they just slaved all day over this meal and everything else. So then when mom makes a crappy meal or dad makes a crappy meal or one of the brothers and sisters make a meal, one of their brothers make a meal that's not so great, they're like, well, it's edible. Well, like they don't go into teasing or bugging or anything else because they're starting to like put two and two. Like I might make a bad meal
once in a while,
and that happens.
Yeah, and another just to touch on what both of you said is that like it's one thing to like train your kids to recognize that work is a very real part of life, but it's like we were saying, but like journeying alongside them. And it's like you're not just putting your feet up and delegating all of the household tasks to the kid because like. Coming back to what you said about like discipline, that's something you need to journey alongside them with. It's not like, we figured everything out and you need to learn the rules. But it's like we're coming up on the season of Lent, that like we have an opportunity to kind of model, self-discipline. And, being realistic with them, like sometimes this is hard. So like for kids to witness, they're like, okay, no, our parents are striving for holiness. It's like they don't just have everything figured out. Same with the chores. They're like, okay, we can't expect them to do anything we're not doing ourselves, so we need to model work. So all of the areas that we want to properly form our kids in, we need to act with integrity as well.
All right. Well, I got to cut you guys off because we're way out of time today. But thanks for sharing some of the things that you're doing at home to raise your children. And I think it's a beautiful thing. I think it's a beautiful thing when parents journey with their children and parents take the responsibility of being an example of faith, but also an example of good Christian people. And I think that's, the Lord shows us an example of that. And you guys as parents are the example for your children. So I think it's really cool that you guys shared some of what you do. Of course, that's not an exhaustive list, right? So if people have maybe some tips that they want to share with us, you can leave a comment on this video or on our Facebook or Instagram page as well. Or if you disagree with Josh or Matt about how they parent, you can also leave a comment there. Or if you have another idea for another episode of the Catholic Buzz, you can drop it to us there. Or send us an email at askus@thecatholicbuzz.com. That's all the time we got. So my name is Father Daniele, and I'm joined always by Josh Sullivan and Matt Van Milgen. We'll see you next time on the Catholic Buzz.